Dying Light 2 is not only a pretty fantastic game in my opinion, but it's also a love letter to the modern zombie genre. There are plenty of hidden details and Easter eggs if you know where to look, and today I'm going to share just some of the ones that I found on my first playthrough. There will be spoilers for the main storyline, so if you want to avoid those, this is your warning to come back once you've finished the game. With all that out of the way, here are some things you might have missed in Dying Light 2. Right from the opening of the game, we are given some indication that the developers want to reference other zombie universes in this one. When Aiden and Spike are searching the house in the game's opening, they stumble across the remains of an end-of-the-world party, quite literally for these people. But if you inspect the record player, you can see the vinyl Who Do You Voodoo, which Aiden remarks sounds familiar. This is a callback to another game that Techland developed, Dead Island. That game began with a very memorable opening.
Things that go bump in the night. MB got the thing that go bump in the night. Whoa, voodoo, bitch. Hide your kids, grab your wife, better get out of sight. Voodoo, bitch. Let's go.
Set on the remote island of Banoi, partygoers danced to this same song, unaware that a zombie outbreak was happening all around them. The character in the opening also decides to go to sleep with a bottle of whiskey and some sleep aids, which is not recommended to mix those together by the way. Except this person actually wakes up, unlike the people here. Who Do You Voodoo is in itself likely a reference to one of the proposed origins of the zombie folklore. In Haitian folklore, zombie are reanimated corpses, most often brought back with the power of voodoo, and this idea is often attributed to be the origins of the more Western zombies, which more recently are the product of science and not mysticism nor magic. Also, this party is the first time we can find bottles of Dead John, this world's most popular alcohol. This one could be a subtle reference and even maybe a foreshadow. Dead John could be a play on the words of the phrase Dear John, the term for a letter that a lover leaves behind when they move on. This could be a foreshadow to how Hakon left Lawan behind in a similar way, something which we find out much later. It's also possible that Dead John is a reversal of an incredibly popular drink in our world, Jack Daniels, with the initials JD being reversed to DJ. It's also 110% volume or 220 proof, which is not only impossible, but would most likely mean if you drink too much of it, you yourself will end up a Dead John. Or whatever your name is. After leaving this area, we get a small remark by Aiden about not having to climb this radio antenna. This is a reference to the first game, in which players needed to climb them to complete certain objectives. It could also be a very slight nod towards Far Cry though, in which many people began to poke fun about the repetitive nature of the radio towers in that series. Ironically enough though, Dying Light 2 doesn't do away with this mechanic entirely. In fact, the towers you have to climb later on in the game are themselves radio towers. Once the game opens up, you hear about the event known as Black Monday. This was the day of January 6th, 2025, when massive chemical bombings were supposed to help wipe out the infected. Not only did this not work, killing hundreds of thousands of people, but it also ended up mutating the undead even further, making life much more difficult for the survivors. But that name in itself, Black Monday, has a number of references to other fictions. Black Monday is actually a general term often used to describe horrible world events that occur on a Monday, such as the stock market crash of 1987, but it might also be a reference to other zombie stories. For example, in the show Z Nation, the survivors often refer to the beginning of the outbreak happening during Black Summer, the term for the start and most chaotic period of their zombie apocalypse. In fact, we now have 2 seasons of a show called Black Summer, which documents this time period in that universe, offering a much more dark and violent tone compared to Z Nation, which is often silly and more light-hearted. But yes, they are confirmed to be in the same universe. Black Monday could also be a reference to another game which shares very similar themes to Dying Light, Tom Clancy's The Division. Although that game is not about zombies, it is about a virus that breaks out and causes huge devastation. That virus was sometimes known as the Dollar Flu, as it was spread mostly through cash during one of the most busiest retail periods of the year, Black Friday. But that's not the only universe that is referenced in Dying Light 2. Around the city you can often find cordyceps. These are real-world fungi which spread spores that affect certain species of ant. The spores hijack the ant's brain and essentially mind control them to climb above the entrance of the ant colony. The ant then dies and the cordyceps grow out of the ant and drop on top of the colony, spreading throughout it. In The Last of Us, this process somehow transfers into humans, and that's what causes the zombie-like infected in that universe. The fact that those same fungi are found here in Dying Light 2 is surely not a coincidence. Now, one of the main characters in Dying Light 2, Lawan, is probably very familiar to you.
Probably the other way around. Pilgrims tend to be the love 'em and leave 'em type. Always on the move.
You a love 'em and leave 'em type?
I'm just pursuing my goal.
So, your constellation would be Orion, the hunter.
Most of you will recognize this as Rosario Dawson, who is a fairly well-known actress, especially recently, appearing in both The Mandalorian as Ahsoka Tano, and before that as Claire Temple in the Netflix Marvel series. She was also in Zombieland 2 playing Nevada, which is also an interesting coincidence. But she's also had a number of cheeky references, particularly in her room at the fisheye. The main one can be found on the map in her room. At the top you can see Villador City map with Villador crossed out replaced with the word Sin. This is actually a callback to Frank Miller's movie Sin City, which Rosario Dawson also starred in as another no-nonsense female known as Gale. Even the font looks very similar. On her table you can also see she's written "I wish I could be Wonder Lawan," which might just be a reference to Wonder Woman 1984, a film that contains magical wishes, although admittedly I haven't seen that one yet. Later on we work with a number of people from Peacekeeper Squad 404.
It went like this. Whoa.
The nerds amongst you might have already noticed the reference to Error 404, a network error in that a page or file can't be found. This is possibly tied into the idea that in this universe many people go missing, something Aiden is all too familiar with. But it also serves as some on-the-nose foreshadowing that most of this squad isn't going to make it. We see that the team sent to the broadcast tower are all wiped out by infected during their time there, they themselves never found. But there's more to it than just that. The squad members all have pretty peculiar names. The first two we lose are called Leon and Chris, and just in case you think that's a coincidence, Chris's tag actually reads the full name Chris Redfield.
Chris?
Chris Redfield and Leon Kennedy being two of the main protagonists of the Resident Evil series, yet another story about zombies. But we still aren't done yet. The group sent to the tower and not returning reminds me a lot of the movie Aliens, the sequel to possibly my favourite movie of all time, Alien. This squad of Marines are sent to a colony and never return, just like this squad of peacekeepers, and what would you know, two of them are named Hudson and Hicks, the same names as two of those unfortunate Marines.
God damn it.
You secure that shit, Hudson.
No! God, please, no! No! No!
So there you have it, just some of the brilliant references I managed to find on my first playthrough of the game. I'm sure I could find lots more if I go back and play more, and be sure to let me know down in the comments if you found any that I missed. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.